Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm sitting here in Zurich. Can everybody hear and see? I have a split screen of several different places across the world. Michael, are you sitting down there? Can he hear me? He can.
Oh.
Wave. Eastman, I see over here. A sign. Cleveland Institute. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Christiane, wonderful to see you. I recognize that room very well. Wendy Ellman. This is quite well, as they say, we're not in Kansas anymore. This is a brave new world. Thank you very much for the invitation. As you say, I'm sitting here in Switzerland and working in Germany and trying to learn Iago on the run and yet flying back in my mind to thoughts about this brave new world that we are definitely inside of. Now, I know that your days are going to be filled with a massive amount of technical sharing of ideas and how things work and projects that are fomenting and fermenting and getting more interesting. But I thought maybe just from my standpoint and my limited experience or what I've been trying to do in Manhattan or other places around the world as well, but predominantly in Manhattan, some general thoughts that I as an artist, never want to have very far from my mind in teaching in general, in the world we live in general, and quite specifically in technology. If I can start with a very silly story, as the story goes, a teacher standing in class and probably an English or a history class or something, and looks around the class and sees one of the more lazy students in the back, Johnny. Oh, it's always Johnny, right? And Johnny is asked, Johnny, can you tell me, please, quickly, the difference between ignorance and apathy? And Johnny can't be bothered. He kind of shakes his head and he looks up and he says, I don't know. I don't really care. That's one problem. That's an education problem we deal with all the time. I think that we are entering, or we have entered firmly into a time in general, if I may be so general, where the phrase goes farther. I don't know, I don't care, and I don't really care what I don't know. And why I bring this up is because what this has to do with musical technology is probably nothing, but it has everything to do with education. It has everything to do with arts and humanities. And that's one of the things that is my real passion in all of this, is that somehow arts and letters become another lynch point, another focus point in all the dialogues of our now, which are certainly economic, certainly political, historical context, social dynamics. We live in a world called globalization. I don't think globalization is about homogenization. I don't think technology is about homogenizing anything. I think it is about the instant ability to know how different we are any particular time of the clock, of any clock, in any particular geographic juxtaposition in the world we live in. Now, what does that have to do with music? Well, it seems to me the understanding of the difference of people is inherent in the identifiers of any culture, and that is found in the arts and letters of any culture. And the performing arts, to me, are the conveyance of those stories, are the very real identifiers of who any one of us are in whatever culture we may be, which, quite frankly, reinforces ourselves, but more importantly, mitigates anyone else's apprehension of a culture in that sense of other. And it's the sense of other that I think is becoming very dangerous in our perspectives today, certainly in our society, certainly in our politics. And I think that we underestimate how powerful the arts and letters, humanities, if you will, and certainly performing arts can be in this mitigating of the fear of other, or the fear of unknown. The inherent question that then becomes is, what is the difference between what we do and how we do it? And this is where I think we jump right into educational technologies, which becomes extremely interesting. It used to be that a teacher could perhaps have a powerful, amazing effect over a certain amount of time, over 100 kids, that he could participate or she could participate in that moment of immediate epiphany or enlightenment of some kid. Well, obviously, geometrically proportioned with technologies, that can happen so much on a so much wider and larger basis. That's terrific. Why I called my little moment here, protecting aha moment, is because I'm not sure if we ever have been able to measure whether there was an aha moment. Whatever we're doing in our technologies, with however many hundreds of thousands of people at any particular time, or students over a certain longer period of time, or as Mr. Tilson Thomas will certainly discuss about his YouTube Symphony and other programs that he's involved with, whatever those numbers are, whether we can measure aha or not, our goal must remain aha. It seems to me that if I wanted to say anything as someone who very much likes to teach and very much likes to exploit the technological abilities of transgressing, if you will, geography and time, dependent on schedules, but still be able to maintain constant educational contact, is that it is driven by education. It doesn't really matter whether we're doing it like this or whether somebody's sitting in front of us. It's whether or not we can communicate, we can embrace, whether we can enhance, revitalize, or in fact create the aha, epiphanal moment for our younger colleagues, as it were, in whatever medium we're working in. Kathy Davidson just came out with a wonderful, maybe you know her name, down at Duke University, quite a phenomenal, I find, quite a phenomenal writer on technology and education and the new world we're looking at. And there's several things she said that are just amazing. I could just quote one book after the other, but the last book she just came out with is called Now You See It, which is really quite wonderful. But she makes a wonderful point that just snapped me up like this, and that is that most kids starting junior high school today will be at our age, certainly, if not in their simply getting into the workforce in the middle 20s, late 20s, whatever that may be, regardless of their field, working in, around, from technologies that have not yet been invented. I find that a staggering kind of reflective moment. We feel that we are very much on a cutting edge of music technology and music educational technologies here, and we have serious issues that we want to discuss, and I would like to bring a couple of those up. They're always about quality. They're the quality of instrument as well as quality of intent. But I think we cannot underestimate how powerful our mission as music educators, if I may be so bold to include myself in your profession, what a mission we have, what a possibility we have to perhaps even participate in a reframing of why arts and humanities and why the performing arts are important to the larger dialogue of who we are as a people and how we educate our young people, or even make it possible for people who missed any kind of education processes early in their lives to catch up later in their lives. The adding to that is possible of all these thought processes in educational technologies seems to me a very exciting frontier. But we are very much, I think, in a frontier. And why I decided to say something as banal as the aha moment, which we know is inherent in education, is because regardless of what technology we are using, at what time, for what purpose, it is still all about knowledge. It's all about the quality of communication, the quality of inspiration that engages a performing artist into their own talent farther and deeper for the real purposes of communicating to a wider public so that they can find their own identifiers to what they consider to be their story and their culture. The phenomenon of teaching a technology, I know we all read these articles that go by. There was a real flourish a couple of months ago in the New York Times of articles bashing back and forth of whether computers should or should not be put into classrooms, whether it was an appropriate expenditure of states to be enhancing technologies in the classroom. What the hell's that got to do with teaching? And is it? And our kids are too much in Facebook anyway. And it just seems to me that we in the arts have a possibility to say very firmly, you're missing the point. One thing is engineering. The other is philosophy. We deal with philosophy. We are content managers. We are enlightened content managers in the music education field, or music education technology field, if you will, in that we are exploiting every possible means we can know. What every possible means we can inspire a company, such as Polycom, to build the best technological assets that they can for us to do what we do in an educational field. They have to justify that on a completely arbitrary, objective line of quotients, fees, costs, placements, sales, all of that, which is important. But without them, that quality, we can't actually go on and be knowledge providers. I think we are captured today, or we are trying to break out. When I say generally we, I mean in general, when somebody thinks of education, I think we are coming to grips with this phenomenon in this digital world of the difference between information and knowledge. Well, I think what we do as music educators is about knowledge. We add up information. We exploit engineering. I very often in a master class will talk to a voice student about engineering. In other words, how their body's built, what the piece is about, whether the structure of music is going, and so forth and so on. Whatever these pieces that we build, that's engineering. We get that out of the way because we want to be completely preoccupied with content management. Content management is the only place where any kind of qualitative aha moment can take place, it seems to me. If I'm asked by somebody whether someone can learn how to teach over the internet, or whether someone can learn how to sing over the internet, the answer would probably have to be more no than yes. Can you augment someone's personal progress or engage with them and augment how they study for themselves, how they become better singers, and with proper equipment actually hear something of their progress over the internet? Without question. Is it an augmentation to the maturation process? Without question. In the music education business, it seems to me that our biggest challenge is how do we augment what must be essentially, fundamentally, and never wavering from the personal musical interchange between musician to musician, teacher to student, professional to non-professional, so forth and so on. How do we protect that as an integral part of the musical learning experience within a technological environment? What I'm only rambling about this morning is that for me, I never want to lose the fact that it's always about it. It's always about finding that moment where the enlightenment happens, the epiphany happens, the moment of connectivity for that one person happens as a young artist. This is my goal. That it is sometimes completely dominated by the amazing structure of technological wizardry as we are experiencing literally today. As I did, by the way, in creating the 13-week radio series with WFMT. We had 10 different writers. It was produced by WFMT and my humble foundation called the Hamp Song Foundation. And I recorded it in 6 different cities across the world. And I would have Skype in my ears with cans over my ears that gave me what I was recording into the microphone. In Skype, what was going to me, I was hooked up simultaneously with my producer in Chicago, my associate producer in Brooklyn, my office in New York, and wherever the writer might have been at the same time. So we have become quite fascinated. with how we can produce these things. And I think they do make our lives quite interesting, and they make our geometrically proportional ability to access other people very exciting. But that excitement and even how that packages is not actually what it's all about. In fact, when somebody listens to that radio story about this song meaning this identification of American culture, the whole program is about 13 weeks of the history of American culture seen through the eyes of our poets and the ears of our composers. And it's really quite fun and quite varied, whether it's about trees or mountains or people or figures or politics or abuses within our own society over the years, whether it be slavery or misappropriated civil rights or whatever issues we're getting into. Nobody cares that I recorded it in Zurich and sent the FTP site to Chicago and getting notes from, oh, that wasn't a very good read, try it again, from my associate producer in Brooklyn. None of that matters. It matters to us. It's fascinating. What matters is that happens when somebody hears it and it becomes a moment of revelation for themselves. And this is what I mean about protecting the aha moment. I never want to lose fact of that. Now, what we did in Manhattan School of Music, and what I've been very fun to be Christian Orto's guinea pig over the last couple of years, is obviously doing online classes. Great, that's terrific. Somebody can watch it. They can send in some questions, and we had a great viewership. It was great fun to be the first classical singer, at least, to have his own iPad app, and through that app we built the conduit that let people walk around on the streets of Germany, which we know they did, watching a master class in Manhattan School of Music in the afternoon, and they're on the way to dinner. It's all fascinating. It's wonderful. What was actually more fascinating were the emails that I got, or the Facebook comments that we got, or the actual engagement. People saying, I never thought about that piece of music. We did one class which was instrumentalists playing Gustav Mahler songs, where I would talk about the songs and the inherent context of them, and then they would play them as if they were singing them or telling that story. And it was amazing how we could communicate that. And that's all very wonderful. The salient point, of course, was the flutist playing Urlicht, or the trombonist playing Irdisches Leben, what their experience was. But it was a wonderful sharing. What we also trying to do in Manhattan, and I'll draw to a close here with a couple of points, but was, or is, in fact, this mentoring idea that I have found it necessary to work physically with students in that studio you're seeing Christian Ortel sitting in, so that I know what that room sounds like, and I know what that person sounds like in that room. I know their age, I know their so forth, and we have a good working session, so that when I'm on cans and I'm on a computer and we are on over the CMA of Polycom and I'm on my computer in some other city, whether it's Zurich or New York and in another place, or we've done it in California, we've done it a couple of different places, that I have already an inherent perspective, and then it becomes a mentoring, it becomes an augmentation to their process. They can check in and so forth. And I think this is a very dynamic program that we can build on, and not just for singers, but certainly for instrumentalists. The other classes that I know you've talked about here and you have done is teaching in one city to people in another city, and then participating in trading that off and on. Of course, that is very, very dependent on the quality of the machines themselves, and we're getting better at it. All the institutions, we all have enormous investitures to make that possible. We also must, and this is maybe where I want to close off or come to some sort of cadence, if there's any questions or some dialogue we can have here. But clearly, it is about the quality. One would hope, starting the other way around, that by having a larger context of ubiquitousness of music education, that in fact the standard would stay high. There would be a protection of qualitative and quantitative standards that we can protect, we, the major institutions with the best teachers and so forth. I say that with a certain hesitation in my voice, because I'm not sure that the blogosphere has given us any particular positive influence on the quality of journalism. So I do believe we have some challenges about ubiquitousness that we should be very careful for. The other thing is that we have within the musical community, certainly music academic community, a wonderfully trained, habited grounded community of Luddites. And they are wonderful musical, technological Luddites. And I think their standard, and we have challenged Polycom on this a couple of times, I think their standard is exactly the right standard for us to be able to say, this technology now works. And that is to say, some teacher who's been teaching violin for 35 years does not care about a camera or a speaker. And I get that. But should you get them one time to come into a room and hear somebody play in a distant place for them, given the proper technology, that technological phenomenon, where they would hear and see in an artificial technological environment, and they would say, my God, I never thought that was possible. Yes, that is quite similar to life. Yes, I could work within that environment. This is a standard that I think we can say we are there. I do not believe we have reached that standard yet. We're getting very close. And that's what you people are in your specialties going to help tremendously. And I applaud you, and I'm at your disposal to do whatever I can. But we can never, ever stop insisting that the gold standard for this kind of educational technology must be on our terms. We must, as music educators, with our ears, our experience, our knowledge, tell the technical side of life, yes, now you've reached it. We cannot ever satisfy for anything less than best when it comes to music education and music educational technologies. Otherwise, there will be no content. It will simply be bells and whistles and marketing and clever ideas and, oh yes, we got more FTEs in our school from Singapore without ever having to send a plane over or pay for them to come to audition, or some other crazy associative idea that is bean counting and bottom line. This is, I think, a frontier where we must hold the standard, we must bear the flag and insist that the bean counting doesn't matter, the technology doesn't matter. It must work as if it's now, and it is our now that we share together. Thank you for letting me give you some of my random thoughts today before I go back for another 3 hours of brutalization in the role of Iago with a relentless Italian conductor. And it's the way it should be. Somebody's going to beat me like a bad horseshoe into some usable iron by next week, where I can go on stage and be Iago. I don't know if I have anything else I wanted to perhaps. No, I think I've said quite enough. I must say that I'm going to pass the Cyber baton here. If someone does have a question or reaction to engage or a protestation, that's fine too. But before I do pass the baton, let me just tell you there are a few people that I admire more in my profession in any possible cap that you can wear as educator, technological pioneer, musician, colleague, human being, than the man you're about to hear from, Michael Tilson Thomas. He is truly putting in form and practice in such a way that is so unique and so necessary in the world we live in the Facebook world of kids and the Luddite world of music education. And we have to find one another, and we must protect this. And I admire him enormously. So I'm very glad to turn over my rambling reins to the real professional in the room and let him discuss in some kind of finite detail where we can move forward in this great frontier that we're in.
So, Tom, thank you so much for setting the standard for us and for reminding us of the humanness in all of this, remaining central. I think this is a perfect opportunity to turn the floor over, as you have said, to Maestro Michael Tilson Thomas in Miami.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Tom. I really enjoyed your words very, very much.
Morning.
I'm glad to know Iago is still hatching his plots.
Oh, God. A lot of work left. Welcome to the world of opera.
Yeah. But, I was thinking of this process as you were speaking because one of the things I think we're all committed to here is discovering new ways in which the technology can be part of our lives, which is the kind of comfort zone of how it works for us, and just how naturally we think of using it. And one thing that's become very much a part of my life is to rehearse with people over Skype. And this is so beneficial because very often in the world that Tom and I are so often in, we're meeting our colleagues to begin thinking about a project, rehearsing a project. Very often, 3 days before. For an opera that wouldn't happen, although it does happen in some houses. But certainly in the concert world, 3 days or so before would be common. We would see each other for the first time, and now we're going to take on Kindertotenlieder or whatever the size of the piece is. So the realities are that in a situation like that, if you worked with someone before a lot, either on that piece or even other pieces by that composer, you already have a very good relationship to them and to the music. And you can kind of share your ideas and make something good happen. But if it's somebody new that you really don't know, or perhaps it's a piece that you haven't done, there's more to do to establish the kind of comfort and intimacy, essentially, of what a great performance is between those who are making it and ideally those who are also hearing it. So you can only do so much of that if you're 2 or 3 days before a performance. It's much in the mythology of our profession about, the conductor and the soloist got together and the conductor insisted on this tempo and the soloist said, oh no, it has to be this tempo, and somebody walked out, and there are all these stories. But what really mostly happens is that when you're getting together with somebody, you are very considerate about what they have already done and what their assumptions are, and recognizing that in the time that remains before the performance, there are really only a certain number of things that can be responsibly discussed and changed at that point. You're not going to ask a soloist who has something totally worked into their bodies and spirits to make such a radical change. At least that's not my philosophy. I'm very humble at the fact that the people who are playing or people who are singing are actually doing the playing and singing, and that's very much more essential. But I've just found that using Skype, if I'm having a conversation with someone about this piece we're going to be doing weeks before or months before, well, that's a whole other kind of discussion. And a recent example of that was last season, I did a production of Oedipus Rex in Chicago, and Bill Burden was singing Oedipus. And this is a role that he was doing for the first time. So if this had just been that we were meeting each other 2 days before in Chicago, only a certain number of things we would have been able to discuss. But because the meeting, I had a couple of meetings, some weeks, even I think the first one maybe about a month and a half before, so that was wonderful. He was on his end. He had a piano. I had on my end my piano. And okay, here's a phrase. We're starting here and here. What's your idea about the breadth of this or the expression of this? And even play things so much in tempo, but more in kind of exploring the contour of things. It was very productive what we were able to talk about. Dramatic and musical issues that I had, some issues of his wanting to use certain kinds of sound, and questions of how much time could be taken between phrases and lengths and opportunities of pronunciation, so that by the time we did meet one another in Chicago for that first rehearsal, we already felt, this technology is readily available. Of course, we're using internet too as the kind of standard of what we're doing, and there are other systems, various kinds of video conferencing systems that we're trying to get more experience with and understand how we can set those things up. As Tom mentioned, in so many different ways, I think a lot of what concerns us as artists is using this technology but finding very personal ways in which to use it, so that the sense of ease of communication is there that we are feeling when we're actually in one another's presence. And in all the projects that I've been involved with in recent years, the YouTube Symphony Orchestras, the San Francisco Symphony Keeping Score projects, the work that we do down here in Florida that we continue to explore in our new facility, is very much it's very thoughtful in this direction. That's to say, what are we making? Who is it really for? And what kind of experience will it be for them? How are we going to present the information? I mean, in some terms, kind of how are we going to present it? Are we going to package it? In what size bits? And what kinds of receivable items can it be presented? Which is also a tremendous advantage in people being able to actually locate it and then later make use of it. And then what is how are they going to use it? What is not only what it is, but what's the most convenient way that they can experience it and then come back to it later so that it can be some kind of a constancy, some kind of a continuing process that can be part of their lives. I mean, maybe because New World Symphony was for many years in our wonderful little Lincoln Theater, where we were like a one-room schoolhouse in which every time we did something, we had to set it up and then tear it down. So we kind of felt like so many things we did were kind of wonderful prototypes. And our whole mission here is to say, okay, now that we have the facility to do it, what can we establish that is constant? What has a real follow-through to it? What has leaves a trace behind it that is useful for people who come afterwards? And that, it seems to me, is an essential part of the process of teaching, because when we come in, many of us, and do a kind of hit-and-run masterclass, that it can be very, very effective, life-changing even for some of the people who are hearing it. But the real thing we respect about teachers who are committed teachers and master teachers is the constancy that they have, how patient they are, and how they are present and willing to stick with the student over a real continuum, which includes times when the student may be ready to hear something, or living through this with them to the point that they are ready to hear something. And is it possible that maybe by having some of our messages present for them, something that took place in a class with them or with somebody else, that it's available, they can go to it and say, oh, here was something about breathing, or about vibrato, or about Brahms, or about prioritizing things inside of a formal setting. Be able to find this, get to this, and see if an answer is there to a question that you may have. Or, more challengingly, what could be available actually for you in real time at any particular moment. I mean, I'm going to shift to some things we're actually playing with here in 1 second, but, I'm very concerned about us as musicians from the standpoint of loneliness, because it's an essential conundrum about music, which is that it is an art which everyone would say, oh, it brings people together perhaps more than any other art. But as we well know, the process of learning it is a very lonely process. You're off by yourself in some room, and you're doing something which you don't know if you're doing it right or wrong, and you don't know if anybody really cares about it. And that causes a lot of people, I think, to give up or go in directions which prove to be not the right ones for them. And that can really have a severe impact on what goes on with them in their lives with music, both if they're performers or aspiring performers, but even with people who just at one time had music in their life. The number of times I talk with people at a reception and I'm saying, well, did you ever play an instrument? You say, yeah, well, I kind of played, but then when I was 11 years old, I couldn't deal with practicing, so I stopped. That whatever that age point is, where the isolation and the uncertainty about practicing cause them just to say, oh, well, it's over. Is it possible that something we're doing could make that experience more engaging for them, more something where they can feel that they are a part of a bigger world and a bigger tradition and part of an exploration which could be longer, perhaps even the length of their lives. So with all those things in mind, here just are things about what our basic story is here. Let me show you just where we are physically. You're in a kind of lounge upstairs right now around sort of dressing rooms. You come out of dressing rooms, and then you're in this kind of a green room some of the time. But let me show you a picture of the building itself. I think someone on your end can run this video. Yeah, this is taken from the air. This is the building. You see this big projection screen that's on the right. That can show material from the performance. You're now inside of the performing space. These are all, again, projection screens shown here in different performances. This is at a Pulse concert where the building itself is turned into a kind of club that is used for contemporary music and also kind of dance music, which are put together in a different kind of evening. People kind of come and go, and they hear. This is a more regular. This is a Schubert Journey concert. In each one of these platforms, there's a different group playing. So there's a chorus in one place, an orchestra in one place, a chamber orchestra, a piano for a handpiece. This is some of our stuff on internet too. You're about to see. This is a master class.
Piatigorsky had a trick when he played stuff like this, and in the sonata.
It's a cello master class.
He would sometimes start something like that slightly on the slow side. So the first that actually was maybe slightly under tempo. So it was like
Scherzo of Beethoven 5.
That's maybe a little too exaggerated, but that was the sort of direction of it. Negotiate that move easily and elegantly, and then flow on from that. Is there any possible wisdom for that for a section to play that way?
Definitely. Yes.
So that's Steve Gaber and Carter Bray.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
So welcome to our composer. Hello. So we thought we'd just go through the piece and get some comments. Does that sound good?
Very good, very good. Yeah. Can I, Marin? Can I? Since you just played, I heard the end, and I had a couple of observations, if possible.
Please.
Yeah. In the first coda, I think it's important to hear the motives of the piccolos and the English horn at number 2 and number 4 and 5. So, like really like music from the cavemen.
Strings to be together, you have ta ta, ya pa 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 pa, 1 2, ya pa 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 pa.
Okay.
You must string the you know what the meaning of re pa fa c'est re do re because they play chop chop chop. They play 2 notes.
Mm-hmm.
If you are too soon, you're not going to be together. Should
Okay.
you try again in 13?
Sure.
Who has the downbeat there?
Okay.
And that was a
I'll try it the opposite way, going. So only your left hand. I'll just say only your left hand is doing doubles. Check this out. Don't do the check pattern. Just do the. Just try doing that.
So these are all examples from very kind of direct community outreach kinds of examples. In the case of coaching that drum line or drum lines in high schools around the city, our fellows coaching them, to members of IRCAM or composers like Mr. Goldhoff or members of the Vienna Phil attending our rehearsals and specifically watching what takes place in our performances, and even concert masters holding up, their part and saying, "Look, do you see what my bowings are? Look, you look. Can you see what that?" And all having Steve Gaber and Carter Bray in a discussion of how do you play the opening of the Scherzo of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and enjoying that process because this is a piece that they've played their entire lives, but they've never been in a discussion with one another about different ways it could be done or that were done at different eras in time in the orchestras that they were. So this is potentially something of enormous richness. And as I say, I think our mission right now is to say, instead of these being wonderful little nuggets of things, how can we actually create the situation where this is something that we're just doing all the time? This is the way we think of doing these things, of conserving them, of being able to weave them into something which excites curiosity. And that was one of my mother, who was a very great teacher and of history and social studies, who came out of the kind of New Deal era and was a woman getting her master's in history at Columbia in the 1930s. And she always had this model of everything that it was seize the moment of excited curiosity. That was her mantra. And if you can get people into that mode of thinking and also present to them the means where they can just reach out and seize it, then I think we all have a lot to benefit from that process, both listeners and performers. So thank you for watching this and listening. I'm about also to go to a rehearsal, so how do we want to do this? Do we want to have any questions from Tom or from anybody in the next 5 minutes?
Yes, absolutely. I guess there's a question here that's come in that said, what shall we strive for? What is the future ideal in this virtual arts learning environment? What do you all see as where we need to be looking forward to?
I personally think that very important is what Tom was saying before too, is making everyone comfortable in this form, in this medium, and that no one thinks of it as alien or no one thinks of it as hostile, but increasing people's comfort level with it. Obviously, even with younger musicians, many of them don't automatically think of accessing this or sharing this. I mean, I would love to see in the way that at its best in the Soviet system, in the time when Oistrach and Gilels and people like that had their classes, that they were there and they maybe worked personally with a group of 8 or 10 students, and then every one of those 8 or 10 students had an expanding ring of people around them that went down to, kids who were 8 or 10 years old who were getting kind of supervised practice, really. I mean, in that case, on a daily level. But this idea that there are, in the friendliest possible way, a kind of network of big brothers and big sisters who are looking after one another and caring about one another and trying to help guide one another to where the solution that for them might work the best could be.
I love the idea of putting therapists out of work. Tom, is there anything that you would like to add to Maestro's comments?
No, I love Michael, wonderful, and I want to just augment. I think he's absolutely right. And being someone Michael and I both have recorded a lot and made a lot of records and been part of the multimedia thing for some time. And as a singer, I've made a lot of videos and been part of the television in the theaters and then the VHS and now the DVD and now HD and all that sort of thing. And it's probably surprising to hear, but I have some sort of need to say that I have always and still do feel that all of this technology, and especially multimedia, is only as good as it augments the personal live experience of music. And I think that that goes right into the world of education. I think that what Michael says, getting people used to this environment of teaching is one thing. Getting used to sharing musical ideas in this environment is another thing. The practicality of what Michael's been describing, both in education as well as professional usage and rehearsals and so forth, is all terrific. But in fact, it is that moment that you smell the air in the same room and have the same immediate feeling of now in the recreation of the musical element that I think is the most precious and the most important. You know, that there's so much, especially in classical music, that inherently in of itself redefines the notion of space and time as you are experiencing it as a musical language. And we can facilitate access to that process. We can augment the learning of how to reach that, but I don't think there's ever any replacement, nor should the goal be anything other than the moment of great art being recreated and ingested, if you will, at the same time. That always is, for me, the great gold standard.
I agree, Tom, and I want to thank you for inspiring me to think of something I'd never thought of before, which is the scratch and sniff masterclass.
That's exactly what it is.
Which could bring a whole new dimension to many things we're talking about here.
You've just answered our question. Scratch and sniff. That's the next technological advance.
You know, Christiane, very, very precipitously, I was just reading the Herald Tribune again, and I happen to like Thomas Friedman a lot, and he wrote a couple of days ago in the Herald Tribune, he wrote an article about the robot and you, and he actually details conversations and book sales he's been on, processes very much like what we're just describing, how he goes into a studio in some city and they put a camera and somebody talks to him in his ear and he talks and so forth. But he goes on and on and on, and his main thing is about outsourcing, and I think his main point is quite on a bigger level when we talk about this horrible problem of unemployment across all of our civilizations right now, all cultures at the moment, that so much of those jobs that have been lost are not going to get back. They have been replaced by the very phenomenon of the microchip. But nevertheless, going on and on, this whole idea of outsourcing, you know, what is outsourcing? And you could perhaps even describe some of what we do as talking about outsourcing. But he sums up the whole this wonderful thing. And I just quote it as a perfect step in here. Thomas Friedman. Indeed, there is no in or out anymore. In the hyper-connected world, there is only good, better, and best. And managers and entrepreneurs everywhere now have greater access than ever to the better and best people, robots, and software everywhere. Obviously, and here's our point, obviously this makes it more vital than ever that we have schools elevating and inspiring more of our young people into that better and best category, because even good might not cut it anymore, and average is definitely over. That is a mandate of music education like nothing else I've ever heard. So on that note, I have, unless there's a specific question of why I wore a striped shirt, I really probably should go.
No, we thank you, and I would love if we could just maybe open up all the microphones to have the clapping. I don't know if this is possible, but thank you.
Oh, yes, we
do. Tom, Christiane, thank you, everybody. We're so all in this together. And one thing that I have liked, which as we've been together a bit longer, even the course of this last 45 minutes or so, is that it's felt more and more relaxed, and it's felt more and more playful. And that is essential. There's all this technical stuff we have to deal with, but the playfulness of the experience, of the exploration, and just getting there and saying, oh yeah, that worked, that didn't work. Okay, fine. Just let's, go forward. Keep it, as Cher, my classmate used to say, my high school classmate used to say, keep it light, which is really essential. And when you think about this, we get so hyper about is something working perfectly or not. But I mean, we are living in a world where, how many times have you had a cell phone conversation which was interrupted once, twice, 5 times, and still you had no doubts about continuing the conversation and finding out what you needed to find out? It's all just part of the process. It comes and goes. Sometimes it's perfect. We expect that it would be perfect, and much of the time it is. But it's a combination of that and realizing that even wherever the level of the technique is, it really is possible to have significant communications that are valuable. I mean, that essentially was the YouTube experience, that it was little video and audio postage stamps, yet it really was possible to grasp that people were engaged artists and to engage with them as part of the process. Thank you. I got to go to rehearsal. It's so wonderful to see you. Thanks for the
Me
invite.
too. Oh,
Thank you,
Michael.
Tom.
All right, gentlemen,
Ciao,
thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you very much.
So without further ado, I would like to turn the floor over to Helen Smith and her colleagues at the Eastman School of Music for their panel presentation, How Does Synchronous Distance Learning Flourish at a Strategic Level at Music Institutions? And I think that's a very interesting topic to be discussing, segueing